presenter today. He's going to talk about systems thinking and approach, the enterprise operating system for the concept to cash value stream. Thom Keehan is currently the VP of Enterprise Quality and Operational Excellence for Daikin Applied, responsible for leading and enhancing quality across the entire enterprise. He has been involved in many forms of operational excellence since 1995, including leading the Lean Office initiative for GE from 2002 to 2005, which connected to the Lean Manufacturing Initiative. Thom has run several recoveries, turnarounds, and transformations, and is always passionate about this topic as he believes it's a foundational component to business excellence. Thom, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the invitation, Jose. And we're all set. Okay. Well, thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate your attendance, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you today and the questions and answers at the end. To start off the presentation, like all of us are going through right now, noises in the background will have to be accepted, such as family members or pets. I do have a dog who loves to tease the rabbits and birds outside, so that's an event that we might go through. So, well, the topic I want to talk today is about how you view the systems and the system that you put together for your business excellence. This is a topic I've been very passionate about and working on putting all those connections together for many years. And once done and the foundation is set, it can be quite powerful. So on the first page, I'd like to talk about what that approach means. You know, first of all, what's the vision that you have? You know, why are you doing it? It's so important to understand why. From the mission of how do we get our employees engaged and, you know, we become operationally excellent so that we can help our growth or improve our productivity or create stability into the foundation. The methods and tools are very important. First, you have to figure out how to help people adopt the change to understand the why, and so that they you know, can understand how to move along with any kind of work that you're trying to do across the business. One of very important things is to be able to problem solve effectively and sustainably, and therefore optimize what your true capabilities are when it comes to how fast you need to go at your customer's pace and how that predictability in your system can become very strong. Of course, a lot of the side benefits we've all been working on for many years, which is product cost, process improvement. But really, you want to make sure that you can really get a hold of that data, and that data becomes very predictable and high integrity so that you can always trust it. Very importantly, you've got to be able to connect with your customers. A lot of times you have to realize that you move at the pace of your customers, so you have to be flexible in how you run everything from that customer viewpoint back to really enable yourselves to be able to have the optimum speed and predictability within your business. So if you think about becoming a growth company, strategy deployment or Hoshinkanri is very good because it takes that strategic plan that you have for your company and puts it into actionable, both long-term and short-term items that you work on. Creating a lean enterprise, so understanding your value stream that I mentioned at the beginning, from concept to cash, and understanding how Kaizen, which means change for the better, how do we always continually improve ourselves, and keeping your employees engaged. They have to be able to adopt and to understand everything that you're trying to do so that you can move them along with you, and that's really some of the foundational work that has to happen. On the next page, the idea for the objectives is really how do you transform into a lean enterprise, and there's three main objectives that, you know, have always been with me as I've been doing this for the amount of time that I have. And that first one is enhancing and extending your current capabilities. And this is important because we walk into many situations without understanding what's happened in the past, and what's been taken to a certain level or what needs the most improvement. And really that's about making sure that the people have the right training and education to be able to identify the opportunities and to be able to work the problems that you might have in your product line or your processes, your services, and your information, and how that flows both within and to your customers and your supply base. The second one is building for the future. So how do I maximize both my customer, my company, and shareholder value while looking at the end-to-end value stream so I can always be ahead of the competition? That's really what that building for the future means. Creating a cost-effective culture, meaning I optimize my costs and I operate within them. Sometimes I'm always very careful about what a cost effort looks like, or a material cost takeout, which I did at the very beginning of my career as an engineer, because you can cost your way out of competition. So you have to be very careful juggling this kind of cost initiative, and that's why I call it more of a cost-effective culture. How well can you operate at the right cost? So the strategic process is important. You first have to have a strategic plan. Whether you're optimizing a function or a business unit or the overall business itself, that strategic plan is very, very critical, because everything builds on itself from that. So once you have that strategic plan and the vision set down, then you can look at your organization and say, how do I need to redesign this? How do I need to change it to be able to be set up to actually execute the strategic plan? From that, then having the operating model. How do we move ourselves through this value stream of the company so that we can satisfy our customers as needed? And then creating that focus and alignment, and that's your projects and your programs and the prioritization and the alignment with strategy deployment. That's such an important method that really brings that all together. And then, of course, the whole operational excellence foundation that you have, bringing visibility and transparency with the right KPIs and the right operating rhythms and the right visibility to what we're doing to improve and change the business. And this is really the beginning of how we think about our business as a system. And this is the beginning of systems thinking. The operating model that I've worked on for a long time is really kind of getting a customer to customer value stream approach. It's a bit twofold in this graphic, but you think about how your customers give you that market opportunity to a product. And this is where the translation of customer requirements is so critical. For the next value stream moving into product to launch, this is the translation of those customer requirements into technical requirements and how we're going to get our products ready to launch into the manufacturing environment. And then the next one is order to ship. How predictable and optimum can I be? And that's that translation of technical requirements into the bill of material that we can put into the factory and have everything up to date and ready to use. And then, of course, our ship to delivery back to our customers. A lot of the what I would call above the plant or back office functions inside of manufacturing are so critical along the way that I've laid out on the bottom, like the product management process, the sales management process, your design for manufacturing, design for recycling, design for service, advanced engineering into the manufacturing operations to make sure you have all of your material ready to use. Then the vertical component of this operating model is the strategic development of the strategy into strategy deployment, or the Hoshin Kanri, into that annual operating plan. So this is how I've tried to depict it onto one page as to how the operating model, and it's really the value stream of the concept to cash. Inside each one of those are core competencies that you need, or the core processes for your system. And this is very important because they all integrate with one another. So for instance, the sales management process, or how we actually strategically analyze our price and put it into the market. The demand forecasting, our product management and our program management, and how do we launch that, and design reviews. In the manufacturing operations, keeping everybody safe and making sure we're hitting the right environmental regulations and having a good, solid total quality management across. And then the integrated supply chain, looking at that network, understanding our cost models and understanding the best business practices that we might have to translate back into the business as improvements along the way. Some of the processes in global finance and global human resources are laid out to make sure we have the right talent and we have the right skill base and we have the right educational training programs, and that we can measure and understand financially how does all that play into everything. The continuous improvement methods are really important because the way I've laid it out in those four, after many, many years of training and certifications, this whole first point of how do we take change, get it adopted by the organization, and then accelerate that change the way through. So this is all about accepting change with the employee base. And then once that occurs, you can start using lean to eliminate that waste and see what you have in front of you and clear your obstacles and barriers. And then understanding the problems that come out and how do I use the proper methodology. There's several problem-solving methodologies that apply for the situation. It's not just one fits all. So that's important to understand what those are and where to apply them. And really the basics of how do I analyze data? How do I look at the data, capture it, make sure I have the right measurement system, and the measurement system is accurate and does everything that I need it to do. And then I can look at that data and make sure I can start making decisions from it, which then translates back to the improvement I've made to the people. Hey, this is what we did run through the system, and this is what we got. Let's do another iteration of it. One of the important things about this setup with those core processes is that you have accountability and ownership. And one of the ones I always like to call out is that you have demand forecasting in the sales and commercial operations area. And in the supply chain, you have your sales and operations planning. So, and although the ownership of that is in the sales and operations planning, the accountability is really from that demand forecasting. And that's how they start to really connect. And you can do that through all of these main areas of your enterprise value stream. Then you have to be able to measure it, right? So how do I look at it and determine what are the right measurements that I have? A really good methodology is the transfer function method, that y equals f of x, where I can have my main core metric of, say, operating profit. Well, then how do I take the variables that I have, or those x's that I know mathematically tie to the improvement in that big Y? And then you have to operationalize it. So you have to do that as a little tree as it expands down inside of your business, so we can still see how they all mathematically tie up. You really execute it as a business at that Y level, and then the X's are really the leading indicators that you have that will start to produce the performance and the predictability of what's going to happen. And then, of course, having the right cadence and the right operating rhythm around how do I, measure it and what do I make visible both on a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly basis, so that we can see those improvements and the employees are engaged as they see that improvement go through. As an example, one of the important things is to be able to connect them, right? So if we think about, product development, right? So the big Y would be our lead time, for instance. Are we at the right lead time for what our customers' expectations are? And those are affected by those X's of how well am I moving through my program management process. So the first pass yield as I go through the gates. How much time does it take me to go through each one of the phase gates of the program management process? How long it takes me, the number of changes after I've frozen the design. And then you get into the manufacturing, which would be that order to ship lead time as the big Y. And you can see that one of the effective measurements is that design for manufacturing, which is on-time launch starts. So how well was I able to launch this product on the time that we said we were going to, based on a lot of those leading indicators that we see within product development. Then the idea of using a balanced scorecard is really important, so that you can see from input to output of your business, how well am I doing? And if I see something that doesn't work well all the way back into sales and commercial, such as, the quote or proposal quality, how that affects all the way through. And if I can mitigate it and resolve the issue that we have all the way up front, I take away so much waste and so many other problems that just move their way down that value stream. And then the culture of what we have as the fundamentals for any kind of continuous improvement, process excellence, business excellence, what we want to call it. But the real foundations and the fundamentals are so important. And when we talk about lean and the 5 principles that we've been operating under for so long, and that's making sure that the value, and we understand it from the customer's perspective, the value stream that we have, identifying that, and then using some of the tools like value stream mapping to make it visible and understand where we have opportunities for improvement. And then being able to move into flow, so I'm not batching and I can see my issues as they arise rather than in big chunks, from batch mentality, which allows me to then operate on pull. So I replenish as my customers are pulling on my work, both internal and external. And then that Kaizen approach, which is perfection. How do I always want to improve and make sure I can take it to the next level? Now, as we move a little deeper, we start identifying what the wastes are. And those wastes have been some of the fundamentals for a long time. Waiting time, transportation, overproduction, motion. But really one of the ones we have to look at, constantly are what is the people's talents that we are either have a block to or we're not utilizing as much as we really should. And that's a really critical one because it's your people that are actually putting all these changes and making all this work. So you got to make sure that you have the right skill base and that you're not overlooking any kind of talents or skills that you have right in front of me. And then, of course, especially above the plant, outside of manufacturing, it's so important to be able to put that blueprint down on paper, which is the value stream map. And outside of manufacturing, so much of that waste is in the information flow, where you see repetitive pulls on data from Excel spreadsheets or this person or emails or phone calls. And being able to identify that and lay that out is crucial because so much of the issues in the process flow can be mitigated or taken care of through the work that you can do to improve the information flow. And then, of course, understanding your time. Lean is really, all about time. How do I make sure I have more time to do the things that are truly value added that I need to work through? The timeline, which varies on the type of product that you're working on, but the 4 ways that I've always looked at it is first is it's expose. Really just kind of make things visible so you can see what the non-value added activities are and you can start clearing that waste. Then next, it's expand. How do I start to move where I am outside to the other inputs and the other outputs that I have? So a great place to start is in manufacturing on one of your lines, then move to the rest of manufacturing, start to move into engineering and out the supply chain. So it's important to start expanding it so you have control of how the system actually starts to come together. And then you can start working on how do I compress my lead times to the optimum level. That speed is a lot like inventory. Too much inventory is a waste, too little inventory is a waste. Your optimum inventory is what you're working for. Speed is the same way. You've got to be able to optimize your speed and work to your current capability, always trying to get a little better. And then, of course, then it allows you to really connect with your customer and operate on pull. And this is where you can really start to see some of the increased margin. So over the years doing this, it's really been a proven discipline. I've been using this kind of approach since about 2003. It's important to realize that, doing it the right way really takes time. Sometimes it can be quicker, but a lot of times, it's, very important to understand that, that some of these things will take longer than you might anticipate or that you want to accept. Focusing on the customer, both of your process and your company, is really so critical to be able to have that voice to make sure you can adjust and be as flexible as you need to. And then, of course, any chance you get, just removing waste along the value stream. It's like doing your Gemba walks through the office or the factory. You see waste, you put it in the right bin, whether it's recycling or trash or cardboard. So the details behind that are on this next page, where to get into that expose mode, it's about the small fires that you can create. What's really visible to people, and how can you show, how do I take that fire that so many people are interested in and show how this work can start to help that. Then really utilizing, 5S and the 8 types of waste. And if you think about it, 5S is a problem-solving methodology, right? It helps you sort what you have in front of you. You start to set an order on where I need things and where I don't need things, shine so that everything is ready to use as it is. Sustain and standardization are so critical. And then moving into that value stream mapping to make sure everything is clear in front of you. And then the expand part is when I do wing-to-wing value stream mapping, meaning it's not just about one particular line in manufacturing, it's all the engineering processes and sales processes that come into it. And then you start to figure out, how do I level load what my customers are asking for? I can get into one-piece flow, which applies not just inside of a manufacturing, but also inside the office environment. Then I can be able to start to pull and produce as needed, and I don't have that waste of time that I had before, and I can really utilize Kanbans as needed. Now, a good topic is strategy deployment, because when you get those foundational things done, then, or in progress, then you can start to use the strategy deployment method, or Hoshinkanri. One of the things I just love so much about strategy deployment is it really connects everything together. It's really not a choice anymore, right? You start to see what the big issues and the big programs and breakthroughs you can do for sales and commercial operations and product development and integrated supply chain and finance and HR. So it really does bring it all together. And really one of the more important things that I put across that middle is that people connect the entire system. And this whole systems approach, one of the foundations you're building on are the people inside of your business. So setting that true north from the strategic plan, we want to be here in the next 3 to 5 years, whatever the life cycle of the product is, the pace that you're working to. And then what are the breakthroughs? I don't do it today, but I've got to be able to do it in order to hit that true north that I have. And then what are the strategic initiatives I need to do this year to execute on those breakthrough objectives? And then how am I going to measure it? So if you think about a true north is we want to grow, and one of the breakthroughs would be we have to improve our product development lead time. The strategic initiative for this year might be we've really got to get our design review process accurate. We really got to improve our program management process, and then having the right measurements in front of there and keeping that operating cadence. So to me, this is really where the system connection all comes together. And those of you who have not seen an X matrix, which is one of the visible tools that you have from doing strategy deployment, is it kind of is summarized as, and here's my goal, and then what am I going to go do? How much of it on the left-hand side is it that I need to get done this year? And then how are those strategic initiatives or those projects, that's how I'm going to actually start to make that progress. And then the measures of how you're going to get it as both leading indicators or business metrics, and then who is it that's working on. And this becomes quite a good visual management leadership tool, because you can look at who is working on something to take it all the way over to the true north, or you can look at the true north and find out who is actually working on that. So this is a great way to say, if you're working on something that's not on this, why are you working on it? This is our plan on how we're going to execute our strategy. And what you try to move to is get the visibility of what programs and projects you're working on, because it's not in addition to, it's instead of. And that's a cultural shift that has to happen as you work through strategy deployment. And then it comes into the operational excellence. This is the fundamentals of continuous improvement that over the years I've just found to be so critical to bring the system, constantly in motion and improvement. That first one is adopting change, and this is how you get your the people in the organization to understand why you're making the change, to help them move into the acceptance mode. Most changes, in a Venn diagram, have technical, rationale and political rationale and cultural rationale, and the whole goal is to try to balance that around. But that technical, political, and cultural is really something that takes a lot of effort to manage, but it really keeps the employees engaged in understanding why you're moving forward. And then, of course, the lean, and it's about how you lead lean through your company as well. That's a very critical component of what we do. You can look through LinkedIn and see a lot of people's different approaches, but the execution of lean is one thing, but how you lead it through your business is another, and that's an important item. So it's not just about clearing the waste and all the methods and tools inside of lean, but how does it actually move its way through your business and get everybody together? Then the problem-solving methods. I've seen a lot of problems trying to be solved with the wrong method, and someone's working on an accounts payables project, which is the one that always sticks in my mind. for 9 months, and I kept asking why, and they were using the wrong tools. They were using something for a product versus a process, so they didn't have the right data and results they needed to make those decisions. And once we made that change, it was about a month and a half that it took to get them through. So that's really important, is to understand which method you need to use for the problem at hand. And then, of course, making sure everybody understands how to measure that data, within the cell, inside the environment in your office, setting up any kind of performance board inside your office, so people can look at the data and understand what it means. There's a lot of data generation that's not always value added, so you really have to make sure the data that you're using to make decisions is just right there in front, and it's critical to understand how to look at it and what it's telling you. What do you need to do from looking at it? That first one that I talked about is adopting change, right? So it's talking about, how do I lead change through the business? Many times we do a current state and then a future state and an action plan, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Maybe that sounds familiar to you, but this adopting change is really about the transition state. How do I manage myself through the transition state? And this is a great methodology to take your team from current to future state, for not just the actions that have to happen, but the people themselves. Is how do they move through that transition state? Change is hard. A lot of people get set in their ways, and we all know this from the work that we've done. So having a methodology to help guide you through that transition state is really important. And then the fundamentals of lean, which a lot of times I see people in the hallway, hey, what are the 5 principles of lean thinking? Just to make sure those fundamentals are in, right? And that's defining value, identifying your value stream, and then value stream mapping what you have in front of you, generating flow, responding to pull, and seeking perfection. I've seen some derivations of this that happens, and I always get a little passionate about what I see, but these have been these fundamentals since the book came out that Dan Jones and Jim Womack wrote in 1989, right? And so that's what I always make sure that we're building off of, is that fundamental and that foundation of lean. And this is the algorithm that we use for how do you select the right problem-solving method that you have. So we all have products, services, information, and processes. So if the problem is new and you haven't seen before, sometimes your solution is known or unknown. If it's unknown, then the method you would use is the innovation method. How do I ideate and create and empathize? How do I work my way through that? But if the solution you think might be known, and then if it's a process or a product, it leads you to those 2 different problem-solving methodologies. And this, to me, is what Design for Six Sigma used to be, or was intended to be, which was, how do I define, measure, analyze, redesign, and verify? How do I, identify, define, design, optimize, and verify? So those are important. But if you have anything that exists, that takes you to the other side, right? And if it's known, it's a cut and paste, right? I take a solution that somebody's already done, already proven, and I apply it to what I have. And that's very important to have. You've got to have the right database or the right knowledge inside the business of things that have worked before that you want to continue on. And then the unknown, of course, you have 2 different types, right? You have a deviation, meaning I've been operating at 5 and all of a sudden I hit 10, right? Very, very big jump in my data. And that's a deviation that I have in the process, and I would use that AT methodology. But if it's a continuous improvement, because I've moved away from 5 to 5.5 to 6, 6.2, 7, that's what we would use more of the DMAIC, or define, measure, analyze, improve, and control methodology for. And then, of course, there's all sorts of other ones, like 5Y and PDCAs, and it's important to know that those are the representations, but at the highest level, really understanding what your problem-solving methodologies are and which ones to use are important. And then, of course, data. Understanding, how do I collect data and how do I trust it? And then once I collect it, how do I interpret it? How do I make it so everybody can look at it and understand what I'm trying to do with this data at hand? And then I need to describe it and analyze it. I have, bell curves, and I have X-bar R charts, or whatever I need to actually look at it and analyze it, to make sure that it then becomes predictable for me. And you can, once you make it predictable and it's validated, you can use it in such a powerful way to your inputs and both your input parts of that process. So that analysis of data and making it simple in its representation for everybody to connect to is a really critical component. And problem solving in general, to me, there's 5 steps that you use to solve a problem. First, you have to determine what to solve. Way back early in my GE career, I used to always hear someone say, "What problem are you trying to solve?" And that was a great way to really start what it is that I'm trying to work on. So that's the first one, determine what to solve. And then there's the components of it. What is it that I have in front of me that I can use, or of that problem, what are those components that I need to improve upon? Then how do I sort through all that so I know what the critical ones are? And then I start solving the problem. And then, of course, the easiest part, analyze and solve, right? So obviously, that's the one that takes the hardest time. But the approach to all problems are very similar, which I believe kind of lays it out in these 5. The method that you choose that I showed 2 slides ago is what's critical. And as we become very effective problem solvers within the business, it really starts to be the cement inside the bricks of bringing that system together for the entire business. And then understanding, how do I look at it across the enterprise? Well, it's important to kind of create a learn, do, lead culture, right? So from making sure that everybody can actually go do this. So all your employees are problem solvers. So you've got to have that ability and the methods and tools at all levels in the organization to be able to solve it. And then how do I do it? So I've got to be able to demonstrate the business impact, but I've got to be able to understand how to work my way through the methodology. And then, of course, people start to become leaders of this as they go through the business. And then they go back and they help the new people learn. So it's an endless cycle of learn, do, lead that really drives your overall quality, cost, delivery, and speed of your business. Now, the result is important, because I used to always think about, lean as the elimination of waste, but lean is also about time. And if you think about it, capacity is work plus waste. So if I can eliminate the waste, I've now freed up more capacity so my business can grow. Waste is time. If I can eliminate the waste, I have more time and I can optimize my time for speed and flexibility, which allows me to grow. And then, of course, waste is the non-value added activity. So this gives you better customer focus, better relationships with your supply base, and overall just really good customer connection to be able to grow at their predictable pace that they need as well. So time gives you that option for creativity, which allows you for innovation, and time also gives you capacity, which is helpful for growth. So this approach to how now the whole system comes together, so I have the right options that I need to work on, whether I need to become more innovative, or I need to grow, or I need to pull back and become cost effective. That's where the predictability using lean and understanding that time is that real fundamental or the foundation that we're trying to work from. And then I'll go back to those 3 kind of objectives that, to me, a systems approach to the enterprise value stream which is enhancing and extending your current capability. It's very important to understand, what is the performance that I'm achieving right now, what's my current capability, and then what's the entitlement. What's I did it once, and how can I stretch myself to make sure that I can do it more and more often? And there's always a lot of great work that's happening that you just need to work on, make visible, enhance, and then extend it across the rest of the value stream. Always be thinking about, how do I build for the future? And that strategy deployment Hoshin-Conry method really helps you get there. It puts out that target, 2, 3, 4 years in the future, and what are the big things I need to do different in order to be able to hit there. Not differently, but different in order to be able to hit that. And always keeping in mind a cost-effective culture. Just running your costs properly, whether it's for any kind of cost measure you have to take for materials, or just your costs in general, your SG&A, but managing it so that it's more of a cost-effective approach, and your entire organization feels that and operates that as if it was their own money that they were using to run this business. And with that, I want to thank everybody for the time and attention, and the new way that we're doing conferences and presentations. So appreciate your attention, and I look forward to the questions and answers. Okay, Jose.
Terrific, Thom. Outstanding presentation. Thank you so much for that. We have questions that have come through here while
Okay.
you're making the presentation. So we're gonna capture those and we have a chat about it. As we're having this chat, for those of you who haven't submitted your questions yet, go ahead and submit your questions, and I'll pick a few of them here and I will convey them to Thom. So first one comes from Anna Martinez, and Anna is asking, these are good questions, Thom, because they're very practical questions. And Anna says, it's great presentation, Thom. And where do you see the optimum reporting structure to have continuous improvement groups report in the organization? So you have seen a lot of different structures of continuous improvement reporting. Just interested on your kind of an overview, pros and cons, and maybe where you think is the optimal place for that continuous improvement group to report into.
Yeah, I'll answer it right off the bat, and then I'll talk about different methods. Really, this is what should be reporting to the CEO. You know, the CEO is guiding the business, and this is the way that you decide, how do I improve, you know, across, and how do I become more customer responsive. I've seen it reporting in different places, you know, whether it's in manufacturing, because that's kind of where it all started, and that's what people believe, or it reports to the CFO or the CIO. But really, the most effective place that it's been in is, to me, is reporting straight to the CEO, because you have to be unbiased. You can't have you know, your opinions telling you I have to focus there, or I'm being influenced to focus there. You really have to be that unbiased view and the customer advocate. So any type of quality or operational excellence initiative is really trying to be that advocate for the customer, so that you can take your business to the right level or wherever it needs to be, whether, you know, you're looking for growth or you're looking for innovation. But that to me is where the optimum place is.
I agree. So I'm gonna ask you a tough follow-up on that one. Where do you see that often it gets reporting into, and it's really not that good that it's reporting into that area, and you see quite often it's going in that direction?
Yeah, so thanks for putting me on the spot. You know, the place where I tended to see it not operate well is when it reported in through finance or IT. So a lot of IT and finance report together. And in the past, I've seen that, and I've operated in it. And it's difficult, because then it becomes kind of more of a cost initiative, right? Because we're all concerned about what the numbers are that this is going to generate. Or, well, we don't need to improve that process. We just need to get an IT system put in place. Anytime you just put in an IT system without, you know, re-engineering the process first, you know, you're running into trouble, right? You should buy a system to manage your process. You should not, you know, have your process set up first and then get the system to support that process. So sometimes we're a little backward how it goes. So that's one area. Another area is in heavy manufacturing oriented businesses. It's typically into the operations. And that's okay, depending on the type of leader you are, that, you know, that you have or that you work with, to go across, the person leading the initiative with enough credibility and background to go left and right outside of manufacturing is important. So, but I will go back. The optimum place is to the CEO.
That's terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are listening to this chat, you know, later on, go back and listen to this again, because what Thom has just given to you here is really gold. Because even throughout our whole conference on intelligent business process management, we're gonna see these forces of you know, information technology or technology pulling one side, and the other forces of leadership, and what is the right, you know, blend of those forces. And he has just given us a great summary on what's a topic that's critical for long-term success. So okay, I'm gonna move on here to a question from Rula O'Day. So Rula asks, how do you deal with the limited time available from leadership teams and staff to apply these approaches? Often there is resistance to taking the time to run the workshops or projects that you need to run to make these improvements. So Thom, how do you get that leadership attention and focus, so that you can really get significant improvements for the organization. It's, you know, as you know, leadership is distracted with so many different things. How have you in your career grabbed their attention and made this relevant for them?
Yeah, it's twofold, right? You always take on what the hot topic is, right? Or what's the problem that we've never been able to solve? That's one of the crucial ones, because then people see you're working on an item that people have been working on for 7 years and no one's figured that one out yet. That's always a good way to get people's attention because it makes it visible again. But really the pre-work that you would do within yourself and your teams is how do I identify what the true benefits are going to be for this and be able to attach it to their scorecard, what they look at, whether it's revenue, margin, SG&A. Those are the ones that will really grab their attention. And you have to figure out how to tie it back to a number. And I know that's theoretically we'd love to be able to say I improved productivity, but you got to be able to say that did something for me. So if you're going to say I'm going to open up more capacity because I did so much great productivity work, I now have 12%. And if you fill it with 12% more orders, then I can show that kind of benefit. Or we've optimized how our labor productivity or efficiency, or how many rework items we have in accounts payables. Those items that they feel they're paying to is how you really get their attention on how to work on it. So you have to put yourself in the position as a customer, meaning the CEO, the CFO, the COO. This is where you get their attention, is understanding you're solving one of their critical items that they look at or they receive feedback on from their management.
Excellent, Thom. Excellent. The next question here comes from Zakana Broker, asking, for problem identification in a process, we look at complaints data, any problem the business wants to overcome, such as target achievement, SLA achievement, quality improvement, Gemba walks. The question is, there are other ways to identify problems in a process. How do you go about identifying problems in a process?
So the first place I go is the end of the process, right? That's where you're going to start to see what your issues are. So one of the things, recently worked on is final inspection and identifying what we're finding in final inspection, not just fixing it. And that final inspection doesn't just mean the product. It can also be any kind of administrative processes you have as well. And then you start working your way back to find out where that occurred, right? And if I can fix it where it occurred, and I know this is the old adage, the fundamental of the Toyota production system, right? Pull the cord, stop the line, fix the problem, and then start up again. But it really is a fundamental way to look at it. So you've got to be able to see it, then you've got to be able to measure it, then you got to make it visible, and then you can start, getting the right solution and the right problem solving in that place to start to improve it. But really, it starts at the end of the process and working your way back. I am sure many people on this, when they go on a plant tour, they say, I want to start at the end and I want to work my way back, because it causes you to think about it differently and question things as they kind of come apart into pieces versus watching them build. Sometimes you can go right through the beginning of that process without thinking too much about it. But when you start to see pieces come off, or you start to see parts of the process removed, you can start to see some exposure of what you need to work on.
This is excellent. This is excellent. Personally, I would spend all the time here on the Q&A instead of the presentation, because the presentation is awesome, but the insights that we have an opportunity to get from someone like you, who have been on the trenches leading improvement innovation for decades, it's phenomenal. So on this topic that you just mentioned, Peter Robohan has a question related to customer experience, which you just alluded to that in your comments. And he's thinking in the context of consistent customer experience at an airline. I'm assuming that's the industry that he comes from. So his question is a specific one about customer experience on airlines, and if you can highlight the role of quality assurance to collect process defect data, specifically to drive continuous improvement in employee feedback and training. So collecting the process defect data to drive continuous improvement in employee training. Can you share a little bit of your experiences with that type of context?
Yeah. So one of the tasks that quality is typically given is find out as fast as you can what's happening to my product with my customers once it gets into the field. However you get that data is so critical. If you wait until it becomes a warranty claim or I'm losing customers because of this, you've waited too long. You've got to know the moment that they've commissioned whatever product or service or information you have, how do I capture data on what they're experiencing right away? And it can be a survey, or it can be call center data, or it could, you name it, but it's there. And data can come in many forms. Data can be a number, or data can be a yes or no, a good or bad, a 0 or 1. So once any kind of subjective data, you get enough of it, it can become objective data. And then you can start to use it to analyze. So you've got to figure out, how do I get that feedback from my customer base as rapidly, as soon as possible, and the method to analyze it and to be able to use it to make a decision on what I need to do different upstream, that up in your own value stream is critical. And just recently, we've had a lot of data, in the company I'm working for right now, between warranty and shipping, and all that data is gold to me, because that's what I can look at and decide, what do I need to do differently in my processes to avoid my customer from feeling that all over again. And then two other critical, components of that, especially in the airline industry, I would say, is how fast am I resolving the issues my customers are feeling, right? So I always I always made Lean Six Sigma trainers mad, because I could say I can take 4 weeks of training and summarize it in 15 seconds. I want to know the mean, the median, the standard deviation, and the 95th percentile point. You give me those 4 points, I can tell you anything about a process that you need to know, right? That 95th percentile, man, that's where you're losing business, is those customers that are sitting at the 95th percentile waiting for you to solve their problems. So a lot of people measure the average or the median, we solve problems in 48 hours. The problem is the bottom 5 are waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, and they're the ones that are telling 10 people how bad you're operating for them. So I like to operate at that 95th percentile with, to make sure I'm bringing that bell curve, right, taking all that variation out of it. And in the service industry, you get plenty of customer feedback that you can use to analyze and make those kinds of analyses.
That's right. Thom, this is great, because this airline example is a perfect example that us long-term practitioners use, right? Because the customers do not feel the average of our processes; they feel the full variation of our processes.
That's right.
If you tell me that I'm 90% on time on the flights on average, but I'm part of that 10% time that's not on time, for me, it's always delayed, right? So
right. That's
we
right.
feel the full variation, not the average. That's a great way of the examples that you provided there. Okay, lots of questions. Another one here, and I'll take as many as I can in this time. Another one's from Mark McDonald. And Mark is saying that, the systems thinking approach, what do you see as the most challenging aspect of getting leadership to understand and buy in on systems thinking?
Yeah, so it is difficult, right? And no matter how much experience and credibility you have, right, you still have to prove it, right? So to be able to get to that systems level, you do have to start with a model line. Like, there's one line in one place that needs to operate efficiently, and I'm talking about receivables process, a payables process, a talent recruitment process, as well as a product manufacturing process. So this approach applies, and I've applied it in everywhere. You've got to pick your model line that people care about, that you can make visible, and you start working your way out. And when you make it big enough where you can start to see what the inputs to that process are that are causing you issues, that's when you can say, that's why I need to go to engineering, or that's why I need to go to IT and get them involved in this. So then you bring in them, right? And then you go to the output and you're saying it's not managed properly. So I got to bring them in. And it takes time. And it takes that change adoption methodology, right? Because this is where you encounter the most technical, political, and cultural issues, right, or resistance. So that whole methodology of how do I adopt change, how do I get people to say yes to what we're trying to do, is when you can expose, I can eliminate all this in the middle of my process if you allow me to work on the inputs. And that's how you can start to expand yourself into the systems approach.
That's terrific. Thom, unfortunately, we are out of time now. Terrific presentation, great Q&A. It's a real honor to have someone of your caliber and experience, sharing that knowledge with us. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. I appreciate the facilitation, and thanks to everybody who paid attention.
Thank you, Thom. Ladies and gentlemen, terrific first session. It's just the beginning. When we come back, we're going to have Wes Cooper talking to us about how to use AI ops to improve digital business processes. So we're going to go towards digital processes in our next segment. And keep your questions coming. I could only get to a few of the questions. They're excellent questions. We're going to keep this going on because I think we learned as much on the Q&A as we learned throughout the entire presentation. So make your voice heard. Make sure to submit your questions for every one of the subsequent sessions. So we're going to close this session and we're going to start back up 10 minutes to the top of the hour. The presentation starts at the top of the hour. And as you close your session, I ask you to close your webinar session, and there will be a pop-up that comes up with your ability to provide feedback on the session and any comments that you may have so far. So thank you very much, and we'll see you back soon at the top of the hour.